Hey, it's syndicated radio talk show host, author, singer Al Cole, welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. I come from CBS Radio. My shows are nationally syndicated, and I've helped pave the way to treating women, guys too, with the dignity that they deserve. And I do that through my show, a very dignified network that airs it. And that's Apple's iTunes radio network under their professional news talk division, airing CBS shows, Fox News, NPR, BBC, and C-SPAN 2, best talk in the country around the world, on Apple's iTunes radio network under their news talk provision. And I want you to visit my website, peopleofdistinction.org. And you're going to see some great things over there. You can hear my Apple streams. You can see some of my professional involvements, the professional outreach that I have to people like Arianna Huffington, the founder of the Huffington Post, and also a lot of the cast members of Steven Spielberg's E.T., the Extraterrestrial, one of the biggest movies ever made. Dee Wallace, the mother she played the mother in that film, one of my associates, and also, you're going to see my People of Distinction Humanitarian Awards events. They're national events that I formulated in 2013 in New York City, honoring humanitarian and creative unsung heroes in our world. I've honored over 100 national and international unsung heroes. You can see them all at my website, peopleofdistinction.org. And also, I've had great events on Capitol Hill with members of the U.S. Congress. U.S. Congressman Rob Whitman of Virginia reaching out and sponsoring my events over the Rayburn House Office building in D.C., as well as great events in Florida, Atlanta, too. And so we've been getting around. And also I get around to helping people with my consulting. I'm a major media consultant, which means that I help people to understand the media better, major media as well as digital media. If they're going to be doing a lot of interviewing, how to put together core messages in very gripping ways, and how to make a profit from media these days. It's not always that easy, but if you know some of the skills, well, you can do it. And I teach those skills to people who have books out and maybe coaching programs, people who are going to be doing a lot of speaking and a lot of interviewing, and how to profit from all of that. In fact, profit so much that you can become an entrepreneur, make a living at it. I've helped hundreds that way, and I can help you too. If you like what I'm talking about, I want you to email me at alcoholholic@gmail.com. Got me right there. That's ALCOLEHOLIC @gmail.com. And I really want to thank my CBS radio listeners for coming up with that handle, Alcoholic. Seems like from day one, my listeners have been saying, Al, we love what you're doing there, brother. In fact, we're hooked on it. We're alcoholics. And coming from CBS Radio, I'm also a New York Times bestselling author with Chicken Soup for the Soul. Chicken Soup for the Soul is distributed by CBS's Simon & Schuster, so we keep it in the family that way. Coming up, a great representative of our human family. His name is Dr. Frank Douglas, and he was brought to me by a wonderful publishing firm, Parchment Global Publishing. And they're at parchmentglobalpublishing.com for all of your book needs. And I say that because he's part of my Spotlight interview stream, and I've been doing that now for a few years with having companies nationally, internationally, invite guests to my show. And these are people who have books out, and they're people who sometimes have a national recognition, sometimes they don't. But I found that, wow, these people really have something interesting to offer. And Dr. Frank Douglas is part of that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this guy. And I'll tell you about his book. His book is Defining Moments of a Free Man from a Black Stream. Now, you might not know exactly where that's coming from, but I'm going to fill you in here. Now, Dr. Frank Douglas came from Guyana. He's going to explain all about Guyana. And essentially, he's a black man. he came here at the age of 20 and suffered discrimination. I think we've heard that word before. The good old USA. Now, sometimes that melting pot is not all melted. It's not all melted in. It's not really so much of a compound as it is just a mixture of a lot of people. Sometimes it does mix well. Other times it might not. We need to have values in our lives in order to understand some of the values that other people have as well. Now, Dr. Frank Douglas is doctor in two ways. He is a medical doctor. That's a great achievement. He's also a Ph.D. He'll tell you about that. Both of those are supreme achievements for a man who comes from Guyana and then studies in the United States. And get this, people. He came here on a Fulbright scholarship. Now, again, I'm going to let Dr. Frank Douglas tell you about that. I think many of my listeners have heard of a Fulbright scholarship, and I think it goes back to J. William Fulbright, who was a very notable senator from a southern state back in the 60s and maybe into the 70s and all of that stuff. A Fulbright scholar is something special here. And so I want to get my listeners, you, to know about this guy before he even opens his mouth. He writes about values in his book, Defining Moments of a Free Man from a Black Stream. Okay, black, he is a black man. He's also a free man. Now, that doesn't make him exclusive because, in a sense, we're all free, men or women. With our birthright, that doesn't necessarily mean that that birthright carries over to any sort of societal embrace. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. He's going to tell us some of the ups and downs here. But he has values. And in fact, one of the big messages that he wants to get across to you, my listening audience, values can help us rise up against discrimination, overcome discrimination. And there are many ways that it can do that. And he came here around the time, I think he told me, Martin Luther King was out there with civil rights. And so it was a very engaging time in our history. And so when he came here, I guess he was full of hope, everything else, and the civil rights. And he thought, wow, boy, I'm going to be treated well. And black people are kind of like on the rise and everything. And he's got a story to tell both ways. Yeah, he's got a lot of great advantages. And he's faced discrimination as well as a black man. And of course, discrimination is never anything that's singular to any particular culture, race, religion, anything like that, or gender. Discrimination is across the board. But I think through Dr. Frank Douglas's reflections, you're going to find that any discrimination that you have had in your life can be overcome as well through values. I think I'm going to relate to this guy. That's why I'm very happy to have him on People of Distinction with Al Cole. His book is available on Amazon, and there might be other places too Frank can tell you about where you can order this book, Defining Moments of a Free Man from a Black Stream. And we're going to welcome him on People of Distinction right now. Welcome, Dr. Frank Douglas, to People of Distinction with Al Cole. This is really a pleasure to have you on. How are you, Frank?
I'm fine, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, we're going to be talking it up. And, I want you to follow up on some of the things that I said about your background, even before we get to your book. I think people should know a little bit about Dr. Frank here, and from whence you came. Now, Guyana, some people know, some people don't. I want you to tell us a little bit about Guyana, where it's located, a little bit about your background there, and then how you became a Fulbright scholar, and then came into the United States. Fill us in on that background, then we'll get heavy into your book. So tell us a little bit about that, Frank.
Thank you, Al. I come from Guyana, what was British Guyana. You look at the map of South America, the tip there are three Guyanas. There is British, French, and Dutch, which is called Suriname. And I come from the British Guyana. Guyana is a very small country. It's the only English-speaking country on the South American continent. And I grew up in very humble, very poor circumstances. And fortunately, because of friends of my mother, I was able to get to high school. In Guyana at that time, you had to pay to go to high school. And shortly after entering high school, I received a scholarship and got scholarships all the way through, including the Fulbright Scholar, which brought me to the United States at age 20 in 1963 to study chemistry, chemical engineering at Lehigh University.
And what did you have to do to qualify as a Fulbright Scholar?
In the British Commonwealth generally, we take a number of exams, the last of which is you take around the age 18 to 19. And I had done very well. In fact, in one set of exams at age 15, I had placed first in all of Guyana. In fact, I'd done that in two sets of exams.
Yeah.
And it was that performance I was recommended by the principal of the school I attended to get this Fulbright scholarship.
Isn't that marvelous? Now we're going to get into it. Your book, Defining Moments of a Free Man from a Black Stream. Getting to know you better, we understand more and more what that means. And you talk about values. Now, coming from your background, you've had a lot of value training. And even before you mention your book, I'm going to mention something here. This goes out to my listening audience so that we can understand a little bit about values. Now, I am also a black man, and I think most of my listeners know that anyway. I had maybe the good fortune, you could say, being brought up in this country in a different way because I was brought up in a small state, Rhode Island, Northeast in New England. Not known for black people, but it's a very integrated state. And I've traveled all around this country. I've had the pleasure of traveling around the world as well. When it comes to values, I have found a lot of the great values are certainly in this country, but particularly overseas, in different other countries, and particularly the countries that we call a little bit undeveloped, things along that line. In Africa, Asia, especially Africa. Boy, I'll tell you, people are so forthcoming. And part of values is accepting other people's values, too, being tolerant of other people's values, embracing sometimes other people's values, giving them the benefit of the doubt. I've always considered that to be dignity. And so we're going to talk about values from that point of view as well with Dr. Frank Douglas, a guy who was brought up in a country outside of the United States, came here, Fulbright scholar, has a lot of values, and how his values helped him to rise up against discrimination as a black man. So let's talk about it here. Defining Moments of a Free Man from a Black Stream. Tell us a little bit about your book, why you wrote the book, what it imports here, Frank.
One of the things that I should first say is the title. The title actually reflects my name. One day when I was working at Xerox as a research scientist, a technician who was a Brit, he's actually a Scotsman, stopped me in the hallway. He said, "Do you know what your name means?" And I said, "No." He says, "Well, Frank comes from Celtic origin, and it means free man. And Douglas is from Scottish origin, and it means from a black stream. And that's you. You walk around here like a free man from a black stream." I was actually quite happy to learn that because it was the time of the 60s, a lot of political foment, and indeed many times we were being challenged to change our names to African names.
Mm-hmm.
Something I never did because I had no idea from which part of Africa my foreparents came. And suddenly, the wisdom of my foreparents was right there in front of me by the way they named me, Frank Douglas.
Mm-hmm.
With respect to values, my values were basically built into me during my teenage years, both in high school as I read literature, Shakespeare, etc., and as I went to church. I was in the evangelical churches, and so the Bible was very important to me. And I found that I embraced things like being merciful, being just, being authentic, trying to be wise, having emotional strength and self-control. And as I began to write the book, trying to understand what made Frank Douglas the person he became, what kept coming back to me was these values and this value system. Because as I looked at different important moments in my life, I could see this value system playing out in my decision-making processes.
Yeah. What's one of the defining, to use your term, first word of your book, what's one of the defining aspects of values, would you think, Frank?
One of the things that amazed me, both in academia but particularly in industry, was to find how my colleagues would change their positions depending on the hierarchy or depending on the most important thought of the day. And they seem not to be grounded.
Yeah.
And what I found with having a value system, it gave me what I called really true grit.
Yeah.
To be able to make decisions and not to be so concerned about the outcome as to be concerned as to whether the decision was appropriate, whether the decision was right for me, whether the decision enabled others to do the things they would like to do.
Yeah. Well said. I completely agree with that. Grounding, so very, very important to values. Tell us a little bit about the discrimination that you faced once you came to this country. You weren't expecting it, and all of a sudden, wow, you're a young man. It's during the civil rights period, 63, Martin Luther King, the I Have a Dream speech, and then the Kennedys, and, and then into 64. Man, I mean, even a Southern president, Lyndon Johnson, getting civil rights on the map and everything. Tell us a little bit about your saga here with discrimination at that point.
Well, the first thing that struck me, I came August 20th, 1963, which was about 2 weeks before Martin Luther King's march in Washington, which, I'd never seen TV before, so I was watching all of this on TV. And shortly thereafter, began to discover that, as a matter of fact, I could not attend certain churches. And I grew up in Guyana with Americans and British missionaries telling me that we were all the same, we were all going to go to heaven. And suddenly, because of the color of my skin, I couldn't attend their churches. And then I began to face discrimination from a prejudicial viewpoint, namely professors making an assumption that I could not do or had not done certain assignments. And when I would present it to them, that in fact, not only had I done the assignments, I had done them very well. Yep. They nonetheless gave me inferior grades. And in fact, in one case, one told me very clearly that he didn't matter how well I did, I would never become a scientist.
Whoa. Isn't that something? And how did you deal with that in terms of the mission of your book, Defining Moments of a Free Man from a Black Stream, Rise Up Against Discrimination? How did your values help you to rise up? And at the same time, in a dignified way. I'm sure it was dignified the way that you did it. Tell us how you managed that.
Well, there were two things I think I did, and one of them comes from, my mother. My mother always had various sayings, and one of them was, "Virtue is its own reward."
Mm-hmm.
And by which she meant is that you should work hard, and that in itself is the reward, and not to be focused on being praised or being rewarded for what you have done.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one thing that helped. The second thing that helped was I grew up, even though in poor, humble circumstances. My mother and 5 kids lived in one room. That's how I grew up. We lived in one room, with a detached kitchen, detached bath, and toilets, etc., shared by a number of other people living in a similar situation. The one thing, nonetheless, that I never felt that I was not valued.
Mm-hmm.
I never felt I was not valued. And from my mother and the neighbors around, I always felt that I was a person who would be able to contribute to others and that I was valued. So when I was faced with professors, not valuing me, not valuing my contributions, I would fall back to my upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, as I did that, I began to notice that there were some other professors who were reaching out to me because they began to see the value in me.
Yep.
And so, on the one hand, there were those who were prejudiced and sought to devalue me. And then there were others who were reaching out to me and saying, "You have a value." And because of those professors, I am being able to share this on your program now.
Absolutely. And I'm going to make a reflection here of my own, as I do periodically on people of distinction. After you order Frank's book, all right, Defining Moments of a Free Man from a Black Stream. It's available on Amazon. Dr. Frank Douglas is our special guest on People of Distinction. All right, so here's my reflection, people. One of the things that Frank has not talked about, but I know it's there. I know this is one of the things that helped him to have values, to rise above, to have dignity, all the other words. But there's nothing like this word, love. He's already said it in other ways. Never used that word, but I know that is a big word for Frank and all of us, really. His mother helped to give him dignity, helped to shape those values. Why? She gave him love. You can't have great values, people. You know this. You can't have great values. You can't have solidity of cause and of direction unless you have some sort of love in your heart, unless you know something about that L word. Now, see, Frank came from a culture where they might have been poor money-wise, but boy, they were rich in the heart and soul. They cared for each other. They did for each other. They looked out for each other. And they weren't afraid to give in sometimes to the other person's righteousness or values when that other person was right about something and they might have been a little bit wrong about something. The ego didn't come into it as much. Now, I'm not saying that it's perfect. We're human beings, and we live in an imperfect earth. But that don't mean that there are some people on this planet that kind of really conform to the beauty of values and dignity and love in the end. And so you can't shake them as easily. And you can try to put them down, but they realize, see, there's a wisdom to love, people. It is not just, my feelings. No, it's an energy. It gives you energy when that repository of love builds up in you, all of a sudden you're saying, I'm a rock. I can take it. Not that I'm going to be kicked around. No. I will fight back with dignity, with respect. And you start doing that, other people are going to see the greatness, the wisdom within you. And they're either going to back off or they're going to engage. And they're going to say, I was wrong about you, or I like you. Or maybe they weren't wrong in the beginning. Maybe they're not a big problem. And they're attracted to that. See, love is a rock in and of itself, people. That's why we talk about that on People of Distinction. Am I on the right track there, Frank, with your values coming from love as well as anything else?
You are absolutely correct. In fact, in the epilogue, the last chapter in my book, I mentioned the situation where the disciples asked the Lord Jesus Christ, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and soul and mind. And then he said, and the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And you were just absolutely correct. And one of the things which I certainly found is that where there is love, there is respect.
Mm-hmm.
There is dignity. There is valuing others. And you're just absolutely correct. And I have been fortunate as a child growing up, being surrounded, by the love of my mother and her friends. And coming to America and the first year or two being faced with, this active racism, active prejudice, and then finding individuals, some professors, some colleagues coming forward and embracing me.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing that from that love and respect. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And you will find that in my book. You will find episodes in industry where I was denied promotion. Okay. And where I moved forward and then got an even larger job and more significant opportunity to lead many scientists,
mm-hmm.
where we now have more than 25 drugs on the market. And so that love, valuing others, is just extremely important to help us deal with the challenges of life.
Absolutely. And we're always dealing with the challenges of time on People of Distinction. We have some minutes left. This is a very engaging interview, and I wish it could last longer. But we do have some time left here to explore two things. I always end my shows with possibility thinking, and we'll get to that. But before we get to that, words of wisdom here from a guy who's been there, done that, to the younger crowd. Now, we know about millennials, and we know about that age group that's even younger than millennials coming up, the high schoolers and the middle schoolers and everything. And we know that we live in a different age. However, we know that human beings are human beings, that the DNA hasn't changed, and love hasn't changed, and, discrimination, unfortunately. Well, it's changed, but then it hasn't changed. Now, what would you say to some of the younger people these days? You've been through some of this stuff that maybe some young black men are going through, young black women, and young people of all types, millennials. They are discriminated against in a different sort of way, no matter what color they are, no matter what their background is. The economically, certainly financially, where we know that senior citizens, the baby boomers particularly, own about 70% of the wealth in this country. Well, they've worked for it. On the other hand, millennials, they go to college, they come out of college, they can't find a job or a job up to their capabilities, and Many millennials, they're sharing apartments, and they can't even have their own apartment. They got to share, and the rents are getting astronomical, and everything. How do you keep the younger people in there with right values and keep them in the fight in dignified ways? Let's hear it from a guy who knows. Dr. Frank Douglas, give us some information and inspiration for some of the younger people these days.
There are three things I would say. One comes from the book by Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of those habits was, he said, we're not responsible for what people do to us, but we are responsible for how we respond.
Mm-hmm.
And we should focus not so much on the insults coming, but we should focus on how we respond. The second thing that I would say is something which I said became very famous for amongst my scientists. I would say, we should really focus more on what we contribute and less on what we control.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the way we're often driven in our education and in life, in business, is control. Focus more on what you contribute and less on what you control. And the last thing which I would say to them, which was something that I discovered about myself, is the word failure. That word doesn't exist in my vocabulary. I tell people, when you do something and you do it honestly, you do it with integrity, one of three things will happen. Either one, you get the expected result, great, or you get an unexpected result, or you get an unwanted result. Well, as a scientist, I will tell you, in science, and it is true in life, the latter two, the unexpected and unwanted results, when we focus on them and try to understand them, that's when we get the breakthroughs. It's true. It is true in science. It's also true in life. And so those are the three things I would say. It's how we respond that is important.
Oh, that's excellent.
Don't think about failure, and focus on contribution.
Wonderful. Hey, we love that. On People of Distinction with Al Cole and our special guest, Dr. Frank Douglas, who's written the defining book, and it's called Defining Moments of a Free Man from a Black Stream. You can order it at Amazon.com. Oh, by the way, do you have an independent website, Frank, that you want to get our listeners to know about? What is that?
Yes, thank you. It's www.blackstream.com.
Uh-huh.
www.freemanblackstream.com.
Freemanblackstream.com. All right. Go there, people, and you're going to find out a lot more about really this great human being, Dr. Frank Douglas, on People of Distinction. So we're going to cap this off, Frank, with some possibility thinking. And I do this as a way to encapsulate not only the information, but particularly the inspiration, the spirit of any interview that I do in terms of what if, whatever my guest was talking about in positive ways, well, what if that came to pass in our human family future? What if that became the modus operandi of our society? What kind of world would that look like? And I'm going to put it this way. Now, in major media, digital media, and media in general, there's a lot of, great and positive talk and forward-looking talk, and we try to engage that way in terms of our everyday lifestyle, and sometimes we hit it, sometimes we miss it. If we put that talk together in the right way, well, we make progress. There's no doubt that the civil rights movement made tremendous progress at that time. Dr. Martin Luther King, others who were right out there on the forefront, David Abernathy, and a whole bunch else, James Farmer. And before that, there were people fighting, for rights against slavery, and slaves even fighting for their rights. And we've made a lot of progress. And we no longer, get our swords out as the ancient Romans did whenever we're insulted or we think we are. And now there's a sword fight in the street. We've made progress that way. The millennials certainly have made progress. I consider them to be the least prejudiced generation of all, in all of history. And a lot of that is due to the internet. So we can make progress. All of that, a preface to this. If we did live in the type of world that we're talking about right now, in this exposition of people of distinction, a world of, that has value. And I'm not just talking about the individuals. I'm talking about the systems, the society, the institutions. They all cultivate those wonderful human values that every single heart and soul of every single man and woman has. If we did live in a society that way, and the society that you define so well in your book and in your explications of what you stand for, what kind of world would that actually look like that it doesn't look like now, Frank? What do you think about that?
The wonderful thing of the world we live in today is that we have so many advances in science, in medicine, in agriculture, etc. And we truly are in a situation in which if we work together, 1 + 1 would equal 5, not 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what the world would look like in any endeavor. If we truly work together and valued each other's contributions, we would multiply the products. We would multiply the results of any activity that we do.
Talking about exponential, yes, and I love that. When we talk about 1 and 1 no longer equals 2, it equals 5. 2 and 2 no longer equals just 4. Could equal even 500. We love that. And I'm going to cap it off with a couple of cents of my own here on people of distinction with my final reflection here. People, and this goes out to you, my listening audience right now. When we're talking about that exponential aspect, when we're talking about what a lot of people see these days as quantum, wow, all of a sudden, boy, you put it together and it doesn't add up to the same thing. It adds up to so much more. Well, you got to think that we're really talking ultimately, again, I'm bringing in that L word, about love. You light one candle and it could light up the world if it's the right candle here. And if we're thinking about the right sort of light, there's no light like love. And that beautiful value of love that every single human being on the planet is endowed with. Because every single human being on the planet has been loved at least once in their life, has loved someone or something at least once in their life. I don't think anybody goes through a loveless life, at least not beyond a certain age. And so we all know that if we self-reflect or we just ask the question, what are the most important things to you? I don't think that there's anybody that's going to say something in the top 3 or 4 that is outside of some sort of love consideration. So that's already on the plate. Now, how do we get it out there? First, we get it in there. Self-reflect, people. Take a little bit of alone time every once in a while. Get to know yourself in terms of love. And reflect on some of the love that you've given, some of the love that you've received. As you do that, not only are you elevating yourself at that particular point, but you are connecting to that love energy out there, sometimes that you're blinded to if you're in a rage. But when you're calm and when you are looking around and saying, wow, there's so much beauty out there. And I've experienced so much of it. And you concentrate on that aspect of it. You bring in other people into your life. As you do that, it's just your consciousness now. It's not a physical thing necessarily, except for the vibrational energy. You now relate to the heart and soul of other people. You develop values accordingly. You don't always have to be out there in the grind in order to develop values, in order to develop wisdom and experience. You've got to be out there sometime, but you don't have to be out there 24/7 all the time to do that. Most of the time you can do that just on the inside, just by valuing yourself. Yeah, not egotistically, not, oh man, I'm number one. No. How about, I feel so humble because I was born at all, because I'm alive at all. And I look around and I see that, wow, I'm not alone. Other people were born too. Other people have eyes just like me. They have a mouth and they have senses and they have a heart and soul. I don't want to break anybody's heart or soul because that's breaking my own heart and soul. We are so similar, people, as human beings, that why should we try to deny that? No, we have it so much in common. And we need to self-reflect sometimes to see it. You're not going to see it on a crowded freeway when you want to get home and you're saying, oh, all these cars are in the way. You're going to see it when you're peaceful. Peace and love go hand in hand, people. Let that love shine through so the peace can shine through and give you the wisdom, the eyesight to see the beauty all around you. And as you do that, also say a prayer. We touched on that a little bit earlier in the show. Not so much prayer, but a little bit of the spiritual. Say a prayer every once in a while for your fellow man, your fellow woman. You don't even have to know them. You say a prayer for you, okay. You say a prayer for, Uncle Johnny or Aunt Heather or whatever that needs your help. That's okay. But every once in a while, say a prayer, a love prayer for somebody maybe that you don't know. Maybe somebody in Guyana. Maybe somebody elsewhere. And just shoot it out and say, all right, hey, look, you're part of the human family. I'm sending this prayer out to you. It's a love prayer in the name of somebody that I love. Yeah, now you're collecting. It's exponential right there. You're giving it to two people, not just one. And you are the recipient of that too. Now there are three. 1 equals 3 at that point. And it could be a lot more because that prayer will go out to other people too through the hearts and souls of the ones that you sent it to. Get it? See, we can do all of that stuff just within the privacy of our own being and our own dignity and who we are. Let's not waste it. Don't waste time with things that are unessential that you don't have to waste time with. Now, spend more time with the things that are essential, the love orientations in your life. And the people who you love, make sure you tell them that you love them every once in a while. And see, we talk that way on People of Distinction with Al Cole. It really does come down to love in all of the variations that we can give love on People of Distinction. And boy, I've done 2,000 interviews. It could be 2,000 more. We'll still be talking about love. And Dr. Frank Douglas, I love what he does too. Defining Moments of a Free Man from a Black Stream. You got to order that book. You can order it at Amazon. And also go to his website. Now, let me see. afreemanblackstream.com. Was that it again, Frank?
That's correct.
Okay.
freemanblackstream.com.
There you go. Go to his website, too. Thank you so much, Frank, for being my special guest here today on People of Distinction with Al Cole. We wish you all the best in everything that you do and in your wonderful life directions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Al. I liked it. I like the pace and how you weave. You would weave the topics and make them current.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to do that.